world of rooms, inspiration and expertise, where you can laze in luxury accommodation. And kids can feast from 95 pence. Tickets are free to everyone this half-term and include all the attractions. You just imagine a day out at IKEA Lakeside. IKEA, the wonderful everyday.
Same.
Ho, ho, ho!
Same.
3, 2, 1, bang!
Same.
Oh, thanks.
Same.
What does Santa call his dog?
Same. Same.
One word. 3 syllables.
Same. Same.
Sorry, it's a bit dry.
New plates.
Ooh.
Treat your table to something different this Christmas. Visit IKEA Lakeside now. IKEA, the wonderful everyday.
In 2021, an online pedophile hunter group helped bring a 66-year-old child predator to justice. But his activities proved to be just the tip of the iceberg. What police discovered on his phone helped expose a Merseyside pedophile ring that was systematically abusing a little girl and sharing their warped desires to do despicable things to children. Even more shocking, the main perpetrator of the abuse was female. This is what happens when we ignore the fact that women can be sex offenders. This is the case of Vicky Bevan. I'm Emma Kenny. Welcome to Bang to Rights, the deep dive crime podcast which takes you through some of the most heinous crimes the world has ever seen. Hi guys, thanks for joining me for today's case. I am going to tell you that it is one of those cases that affects me deeply because I worked with many children who suffered at the hands of paedophiles, and I've worked with adults who had historic abuse within their histories and whose healing process has genuinely, for many of them, taken all up until the point that I meet them and onwards in their journey, because it can take a lifetime to manage the scars that these absolute horrendous perpetrators create within them. Today's case is going to be one that shocks you. It's very recent. I followed it and I really wanted to cover it because, again, I appreciate that we do consider men to be more likely to abuse children. But I also feel that so many female predators go under the radar. Even the way that they are treated in court compared to the average male is completely disproportionate. Often, for example, if a young teenage boy is sleeping with a 35-year-old woman, there will be almost some leverage associated with the fact that he may have wanted it, in spite of the fact that we know that they can't consent at those ages. So I do feel there is a disproportionate allowance towards women in this area. And I'm not saying today's case is going to do that. I'm just highlighting that, again, when we have those biases, sometimes the victims are children because we're not looking closely enough at these kind of individuals. And also, I will say before I start, in the UK, I find the sentencing of these paedophiles to be absolutely despicable. The sentences for child molestation and the destruction of a child's safety should be far sterner. End of. So let's go back to 2021. Like I said, this is really, really recent. We have a man called Paul Pickerel. He's 66 years of age. He lives in Lockgate West, which is in Runcorn. It's not too far away really from where I live. And he is a hideous online sexual predator. He's a paedophile, child abuser, and he basically uses the internet, as so many of them do, to groom children. Now, in March of that year, he's in contact with a 13-year-old girl as far as he's concerned. And of course, he is absolutely sticking to type like these perpetrators do. And he's grooming this little girl as far as he's concerned. He's sending lots of explicit, sordid messages. He actually sends them through the Twoo social media website. And his username is Paul55Stoke-on-Trent. Now, in one message, he asks this 13-year-old child, bear in mind, this girl has only been at high school, age-wise, for a couple of years. Before that, she would have been at primary school. Just to put that in context, because I often think we get confused when people start talking about teenagers as if teenagers suddenly miraculously become young adults, which is absolute BS. She is a baby still. And yet he's thinking it's acceptable to ask her questions like, have you had your first period? And she replies, yes. And he then sees fit to say, well, you're a young woman now and ready for sex. Because, I don't know, he thinks he's living in the 1500s, where people died at 30, and that kind of nonsense was actually accepted. He also does the classic, and we see this with paedophiles all the time. He assures them they can keep it a secret, which is obviously based on his needs being met as opposed to her needs being met. And also, that kind of tactic is really powerful, because if you're saying to a child, collude with me in this secrecy, the message to the child is you are culpable and responsible, and you are also part of this issue. And that's so confusing for victims, and it's one of the things that is psychologically very, very destructive in the long term. He also says we'll use the morning after pill, we'll use condoms. So really trying to coax her into this situation where he's treating her like this young woman and he's thinking about her protection and so on and so forth, which again is trying to disarm her and make her consider him as a good person as opposed to the hideous excuse for a human being we all know he is. So he also says to her, look, I want to wait until your grandma's asleep, because I want to slip into your bed while she is asleep. The thing that I would like to slip into him would get me 25 years in prison. Also, he claimed he was 55 as opposed to 66, because of course, I mean, that makes all the difference to a 13-year-old. I mean, if there isn't a 13-year-old around thinking, well, 55 is kind of the age limit that I would accept, but 66 way too late, I mean, it's just disturbing, isn't it? But again, if you think about the mindset of these predators, that's how they operate, because they don't think that they're doing anything wrong when they are trying to engage with a child. In their mindset, the child is viewing them as a potential relationship, and therefore, a bit like on the dating sites where you'll knock a few years off your dating age regarding what your actual age is. The truth is you're doing it because you want to attract people who you think wouldn't be as interested and invested if you were the actual age you are. He's doing this in this situation because he genuinely thinks that's going to have an impact. He's thinking that this child will have certain boundaries on the age frames and 55 will be seen as acceptable by a 13-year-old. Literally an amazing example there of the warped mindsets of these individuals. Now she tells him, look, I'm a child. And he says, you won't be when we've had sex, don't worry. I'll be gentle. Ugh. Again, that coaxing, coercing, reassuring. And we have to remember that children, and particularly very vulnerable children, what predators do is they try their best to create a scenario where there is a lot of praise, where there is a lot of flattery, where there is an engagement where they say that they're seeing that child in a very visible way, and they treat them often very nicely in these early stages, because if you're a vulnerable kid and maybe you haven't got the things in your life that you deserve, the role models around you, the parents who love you deeply and make you feel safe, you are going to be more likely to warm to somebody who is just reminding you of what an incredible being you are. And they know that. That's part of their toolkit. And that is what is so frustrating about these individuals, that they are so adept at manipulating.
Same.
Ho, ho, ho!
Same.
3, 2, 1.
Same.
Oh, thanks.
Same.
What does Santa call his dog?
Same. Same.
One word. Free souls.
Same. Same.
Sorry, it's a bit dry.
New plates. Treat your table to something different this Christmas. Visit IKEA Lakeside now. IKEA, the wonderful everyday.
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.
Children into believing that they're seen as special. And then, of course, they intersperse it with all the things that I'm talking about now. And it's such a confusing time for a child. It's one of the reasons that children, when they've been abused by these kind of people, genuinely feel as they get older a level of shame that is not theirs to feel. But because it's just so confusing, it makes it difficult for them to figure out that they are the victim, which indeed every child is, full stop. So there's a 3-week period where he's also sending loads of indecent images of himself. He even sends a video of him sexually stimulating himself. Of course, he asked this girl to send naked pictures and images. He wants videos of her performing sexual acts on herself. And he's quite happy to engage in this kind of warped communication. But what Pickerel didn't know was that he wasn't actually in touch with a 13-year-old girl. No. He had been identified by the Net Justice Paedophile Hunter Group, and they'd identified him, rightly so, as a major predator and risk to children. So it's a sting operation. He's really in contact with an adult volunteer from that group and having conversations with them. A lot of people have got different ideas about whether vigilante behaviour is ever acceptable, but I also think we have to understand that the police have a lot of work to do because, wow, this kind of sicko is quite common and they are often dealing with a multitude of individuals that they need to trace to protect children. And when you have groups like this trying their best to identify these individuals and pass on the information, then at least the police are given more concrete information that can lead to convictions. And I also think we underestimate the impact of being a volunteer who actually engages with these kind of people, because psychologically it's very upsetting to know that there are people out there who are day in, day out trying to literally ruin children's lives, and to have to pretend that you are an individual who is a child and have those conversations with these kind of people. It takes its toll. So we get to April 2021. At this point, Pickerel is arrested. He's arrested by Cheshire Police. Now, he does what any innocent person would do during the interview and responds, no comment to all the questions. Obviously, at that point, they take him to the stocks and allow the locals to throw various objects at him, all weighing more than 1 kilogram. That didn't happen. It's just how I feel. They also search his mobile phone. And of course, what do they find on it? Loads of images. So there are 141 images and videos of child abuse. 29 of those were the worst type. That's a category A offence, and that means it involves penetration. And it included victims between the ages of 4 and 9. He had 18 category B images and 94 in category C. But as we would expect, this turns out to be just the tip of the iceberg, because what they also find are thousands of WhatsApp messages between Pickerel and another paedophile. And I'm using the word paedophile in the context of offending. I do appreciate that people can be virtuous paedophiles and choose not to act on the way that they feel sexually towards children, but for the content of this video, I'm referring to them in the context that most people understand, i.e. contact crime paedophile predators who affect, attack, and destroy children. So the content of the messages that the police turn up is absolutely shocking, and I mean, it shocked the most hardened of officers. And even more shocking, they weren't from another bloke. They weren't from the expected other males, no. They're from a woman. 36-year-old Vicky Bevan. A 36-year-old woman is the person causing the distress and shock to the police when they are unearthing these messages. Now, Bevan was of Napier Street, St Helens, and she'd basically been in contact with Pickerel. She'd been in contact with him between the 6th of March 2021 and the 6th of April 2021. It's a month. It's a month, guys. And during that 4-week period, they had literally exchanged thousands of messages. This equated to 458 WhatsApp pages. Imagine that. 458 WhatsApp pages. How much time was this woman dedicating to her fantasies and abuse of children? Now, in those particular discussions, Pickerel was expressing the most deviant of desires. For example, he wanted to construct a cellar because then he could kidnap, rape, torture, kill, and, I kid you not, eat children. Now, I appreciate one can say, well, this is just fantasy. People talk about the craziest things during fantasies. But when you think about this man who is in contact with children and trying to get children to actually involve a sexual relationship with him, then I believe that this kind of person absolutely has the capacity to do the most malevolent things to children. And Bevan, a woman, 36 years of age, she expresses a keen interest to carry out this plan with him. And actually, they both start discussing how they're going to create this opportunity. They talk about the sexual gratification they experience just from talking about it. And then Pickerel asks her that all-important question, do you really mean what you're saying? And she says, absolutely. So at this point, they take this one step further and they start asking each other about how they're going to raise the money from this enterprise. I have an idea. We could harvest all your organs aside from the brain. The brain won't be required, but all the rest of the organs, we could do that. And you wouldn't be alive anymore, but problem solved. Anyway, this is what they're doing. They're deciding that they're going to raise this money. And Bevan says, well, what I could do is I could charge money for the abuse of a girl that's basically already in her clutches. It's harrowing to even say that. This woman has access to a child, and now she's thinking that this child can be her cash cow to create this opportunity to further hurt and destroy other children. So they're talking about the idea of buying this house with a cellar from these proceeds. And of course, they also talk about the plans that they've got to abuse other children. This is including youngsters under the age of 10. Not that that makes any difference whatsoever. A child is still a child. But again, the level of depravity is enormous. And during the conversations, Pickerel is really inciting and incentivizing Bevan to go ahead and abuse children. And she actually goes ahead and carries out that abuse. Now, in relation to that sting operation and also the grooming offences, just to put it in context, Pickerel, who has been arrested for this, he gets sentenced to 20 months in prison in 2021. And that's basically on charges for attempting to incite a child aged 13 to 15 to engage in sexual activity and also attempting to engage a child in sexual communication. So the following year, he actually pleads guilty to all 3 counts of making indecent images and 1 of possession. Is it just me? Throw away the key. Throw away the key. I don't worry, there will be a more stern sentence shortly, but still, at this point, I'm invested in just saying, don't let this person walk the streets again, at all, under any circumstances. Then we get to August 2022, and at this point, Pickerel also pleaded guilty to encouraging or assisting the commission of sexual assault by penetration of a child under the age of 13, and that's in relation to his extra communications that they've turned up with Bevan. So it's in October 2022 in Chester Crown Court that he's sentenced for this offence. Now, through his solicitor, he, of course, expressed remorse for his crimes and shame for his behaviour. Yeah, we all believe that BS, don't we? And the court recorder actually stressed that he didn't believe any of that at all, which is an excellent thing to state actively in court. In fact, he said this: I don't accept that. I reject that. I reject that you're remorseful. In my judgment, you have no idea of the harm you've contributed to, none whatsoever. The only person you have any remorse for is yourself. Amen. Pickerel then, at this point, is sentenced to a further 10 years in prison. Still not enough, as far as I'm concerned. Rot in hell. Stay in prison forever, because 1 less of those on the streets means safer children. And that's where our concern and energy should be placed, in safeguarding and protecting kids. He also gets an extended licence of 5 years. He was also made the subject of a sexual harm prevention order for life, and he was banned from working with children for life. Of course, you're not going to want one of those weirdos around your children. But again, at least it gives leverage. If he's on the streets and he goes anywhere near kids, then he's instantly going to have his license revoked and there'll be stern consequences. Now, the police investigation into Pickerel has obviously already established there's a link between him and Bevan. But they also start to dig deeper because, of course, this is what happens. Basically, when you find one individual who's a child molesting paedophile, it is very rare that they are only working by themselves. They often have groups of supporters, essentially, and inciters and individuals who share content as part of a community. Because when you know that there is something about you that is completely warped, it can give you a level of comfort to find other equally warped people, because then it gives you a permission base and lowers the conscience that's necessary to actually interpret the world the way it really is, i.e., you are a broken, fractured human. Go and speak to somebody and do your best to prevent yourself from harming children. But this is why paedophile networks are so widespread, because they communicate, connect, share and support one another. And this is what they find, that this paedophile incident, Helen's Murderside, is going on. And during the exchange of messages, they note that Bevan's actually sent Pickerel images of naked children. Also, she sent 2 video clips of her literally sexually assaulting a young girl under 10. And it gets worse. This woman, and I use that terminology very loosely because I don't really think that she has any relation to the average woman, but it turns out that she has also been organising this abuse of this child with 2 other men. And when I say that, it's one of those things that I can just skirt over because it's just words, isn't it? But what I've just said is that she has access to a little girl under the age of 10 years. And she isn't just abusing that child herself, which is beyond any comprehension any of us can imagine. She is also encouraging men, grown men, to also harm this child. There is a little girl who is enduring the suffering that these are creating. So these 2 men are 41-year-old Tony Hutton of Liverpool Street, St Helens, and he is a married father of 3, which just makes me deeply concerned about the safety of his own children in the past. And also with the 61-year-old Paul Rafferty of Fry Street, Helens. Now, he's a guy who's got a history of drink problems, but I don't even know why that's stated in the research. I don't think having a drink problem makes you an abuser of children. I think it might lower your inhibitions and let the real you come out, but at the end of the day, it certainly does not diminish the reality of the crimes we're talking about today. Now, Bevan, she had started contact with Rafferty in November 2020. And again, like Pickerel, she followed the same sentiments and same connection, which is all about sharing the warped fantasies of child abuse. But of course, this has gone way beyond fantasy and has now become reality. And for one little girl, that little girl I've just referred to, that reality becomes a living nightmare. And I mean a living nightmare. So Bevan instigates conversations between them about the sexual abuse, about what despicable things they want to do to the child, including torture. And while she's organising, and I use that word specifically because she is the ringleader, she is organising the abuse, Rafferty actually poses the question, have you any boundaries? And she tells him none at all, which immediately makes you think of the worst potential harm this woman is capable of. Now, that child victim, under 10 years of age, she was subjected to horrific, sustained, consistent sexual abuse over a 2-year period. That's between 19 and 21, regarding the years. Now, Bevan also was abusing that child on many occasions, but she also got Rafferty and Hutton involved in the abuse multiple times. Can you imagine what that child was living? I'm talking about a real little girl. And this woman is basically allowing these men to violate her, and she's enjoying it and she's engaging with it both by herself and with these individuals. On one of the occasions, Bevan and Rafferty jointly raped, penetrated, sexually assaulted the child. On another, Bevan and Hutton joined and performed a sex act on the child. And Bevan then shared the images of the abuse with Hutton and Rafferty. But obviously, she didn't just share the images with them, because there seemingly are a lot of perverts. So she shared them more widely than this on messaging platform Kik. So if you know anybody with a messaging platform Kik, you might want to have second thoughts about inviting them anywhere near your home. And I appreciate that it could just be a messaging platform that has lots of different opportunities to engage, but personally it deeply worries me when these kind of predators find a particular place to share, because it tends to mean that they don't think they're going to get caught, and that tends to mean that security levels are not that effective. Now, what is terrifying as well about what I'm talking about so far is that Bevan...
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk. Yes, you are running a business, so of course you are working hard. But your web hosting isn't working at all, darlings. If it can't cope with the visitors, you can't grow the business. Try Ionos. It loads up to 3 times faster, so you get much happier customers at unbeatable price. It is easy peasy way to get hard-working website that is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.
And Hutton, neither of them had any previous offences. Now, Rafferty did actually have previous offences, but he didn't have any offences for child sex offences. So none of them had even been on the police radar until that material on Pickerel's phone had actually come to light. So if that connection hadn't occurred, my God, we wouldn't even be talking about this case, and that little girl would still be in the grip and violation of these absolute weirdo predator losers that exist within the world around us, and they do exist in the world around us. So Bevan ends up getting arrested on the 25th of October 2021. They do this by raiding her home, and that's really, really important. You don't want any of these individuals to be given any chance or space to remove data, get rid of hard drives and so on and so forth, because they're clever enough to know that that's one way that the police are absolutely going to bring them bang to rights. But essentially they make sure that that's not a possibility by raiding her home. And then of course they have the police interviews, and yeah, she admits, okay, I did send these really depraved messages to Pickerel, but no children were actually abused during this period of time. So the classic micro acceptance of guilt. We see this so many times in criminals. If you watch interrogations, it will often happen. The person will give a breadcrumb trail of possibility to certain elements of their crime, acknowledge that they have remorse for a certain activity, and hope that just by staking claim to that and admitting guilt, the police will go, oh, well, they must be telling the truth and not dig any deeper. And that never happens, but certainly that's the mindset of a lot of criminals. And of course, they're not going to accept this. So they examine her mobile phone, they look at her laptops, and of course, what she's saying is complete BS. They can see that everything that she said is denying the reality of the content they've found. And it turns out that she'd been involved in conversations with 7 other people of a similar nature, shall we say. In one of them, she's discussing drugging and raping young girls. In another, a boy had told her that he was only 13, and Bevan replied that she had no age limits. Ugh, genuinely, when I have to say sentences like that, a part of me, I swear, dies. I cannot comprehend how any human being can feel that they have a right to even engage in warped conversations with children around this stuff, let alone suggest that they'd be willing to act on it. It just feels so universally incongruent to how a well-adjusted person acts in their life and the behaviour they expect within those lives. Now, these conversations, obviously, they're sick. They're really distressing for the investigators because let's remember, these cases have to be tried. And that means that normal, well-adjusted adults have to read this information and then they have to kind of manage that and go home with that, and it infects their nightmares and it impacts on their family life. It's a real big burden to carry. It's why they only allow you to work for specific periods of times on these units, because it can be absolutely soul destroying. But even though this is distressing enough, let me tell you, it pales in comparison to the horrific images and videos of sexual abuse. These include the rape and sexual assault of the little girl that Bevan and her 2 accomplices have carried out. And you know what she does when she's found out? Even though she's denied, remember, it was only fantasy, it was only discussions, I haven't actually done anything wrong. Well, when they turn all this information up and suddenly she's confronted with the monster that she is. And I don't care about psychological terminology, and I don't care about the people out there in academia trying to call these absolute predators minor attracted persons, as if there's some kind of protective mechanism that needs to place around them because of their sexual deviance. No, they're paedophile child molesters. End of. Take the stigma, you deserve it. You have a major fracture in your foundation of who you are, and you need to acknowledge that and not harm children, but instead acknowledge that you need to work on yourself with some professional help, without a shadow of a doubt. Or I don't know, go and live in a cave somewhere away from any access to children, without any internet access also. But she's claiming that she's sorry. She's saying that she regrets what she's done to the little girl. But you can't be sorry, because you wouldn't have done it if you were sorry. You wouldn't have perpetuated it. You wouldn't have instigated it. You wouldn't have been the ringleader if you were sorry. And again, she does that whole thing about the content where she's discussing getting that basement for children and is saying, you know, that's just fantasy. It's not something that I'd have gone through with. But the police are obviously not convinced whatsoever, because they can see you are capable of doing the worst things to children. Why would we believe that you wouldn't go that far? Clearly, you are an individual of deep malevolence. You are absolutely fractured to your core. Why wouldn't you be capable of doing what you said on the phone? It stimulated you, and we've seen that you do actually abuse children physically. It's just a step further. And what we see with these individuals with these predilections is often they push the boundaries further and further and further. We get to January 2022, and Bevan goes ahead and pleads guilty to multiple child sex offences. Of course she does. She's banged to rights. It's on video. Ain't going to get away with this, are you? And you know what happens when you plead guilty? You get a lesser sentence. So this is all about her protecting her freedom to some degree. When she gives the guilty plea, she actually is on video link and she's crying. Of course she is. She's crying. Oh, how can I make the court feel like I'm less of a threat? Well, I'll cry. I'll use that female side of my nature to seem remorseful and sad. But we know she's not remorseful and sad. We know that the only person she is sad for is herself. So when she's pleading guilty, she's basically pleading guilty to the following charges, which is 1 count of rape, 2 sexual assaults, 4 assaults by penetration, 1 count of attempted sexual assault by penetration, 1 count of inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, 3 counts of sexual activity with a child, 17 counts of making indecent images of children, 2 counts of possessing extreme pornographic images, and 3 counts of distribution of indecent images of children. She also admitted 2 counts of possessing extreme pornography, which apparently related to 100 grossly offensive, disgusting, or otherwise obscene animal porn images. Yes, this creature was also clearly obsessed with bestiality. I mean, how warped is this woman? Everything that you expect. And I know that we stereotype, and I know that there are biases towards particular genders, that we believe dictate certain actions, and often women are seen as the fairer sex and the kinder sex and the more nurturing sex, and to some degree, even though men and women are very similar, women do tend to score higher on things like empathy. So the nurturing value that we expect is something that really feels so distinct and congruent from what I'm discussing now. This woman who is literally so depraved that she's looking at obscene material of animal bestiality and child pornography. Child pornography is obviously not child pornography, it's child sexual exploitation images, but with respect, the police still refer to it in this way. But that's what we're talking about, sexually exploitative images of children. Now, Hutton, he gets arrested in November 2021, along with Rafferty. And then, of course, they do the same. They start examining Hutton's phone, and they also reveal indecent images of children. On top of this is actually some images of him sexually assaulting the girl victim. And of course, during the interviews, he doesn't sit there and say, "You got me banged to rights. I am a horrendous human being. Please help me. There is something desperately broken within me." He's like, "Oh, it's not really my fault. It's actually Bevan's fault. I met her online and she basically egged me on to carry out the abuse." Because that's what happens, isn't it? You get into a relationship, you might have an affair with somebody that you're not really meant to be involved in because you're in a relationship elsewhere and it's quite illicit, and you start having these encounters, and then they're like, "Oh, why don't we abuse kids together?" At which point you call the police. You're like, "I don't need to be around you, you utterly oddball human." But apparently he sees it as fit to give us an excuse to the police. "Oh, she was the one who wanted me to carry out the abuse. If I hadn't met her, I wouldn't have abused children," said no child predator ever. So both Hutton and Rafferty, they just say, yeah, Bevan was the key instigator of abuse. It's so ludicrous, genuinely. It's like when you hear people saying, "Well, I only helped them get rid of the body because, I didn't feel I had a choice." Like, you always have a choice. The choice is at the end of a phone. It's 999, call the police. At the end of the day, there is always a very simple way of managing this. You get law enforcement to come and manage the situation. But no, they just want to project. It's all her fault. Then we get to May 2022. This is at Liverpool Crown Court. We have 37-year-old Bevan and her two co-defendants. And obviously at this point, they're getting sentenced. Now, we've all listened to me talk about mitigation and aggravation. And I do appreciate people deserve to have mitigating circumstances taken into consideration. But personally, the mitigation that's used here, I think, is a whole load of tosh, genuinely. It's like there is nothing available to actually mitigate the action. So they're like, let's just go for something that sounds like it could be real, but actually probably it's got no association or link whatsoever with the reality of what we're talking about. But anyway, this is what happens. So in mitigation, Bevan's counsel, the defence essentially, they state that she understood the seriousness of her offences. Seriously, that's a mitigation? That she understands that she's a absolute child predator of the highest level? I'm not sure that that's mitigation. I just think that's factual. Also, they mitigate that she accepted that she was in acute need of help to deal with whatever it was that caused her to behave as she did. That's not mitigation. That's just please don't be as hard on me because I've realised it was really bad and I really need help. Anybody's going to throw that in. Nobody's coming into court going, did nothing wrong. Absolutely think that what I did was fine. Absolutely have no intentions of changing. Nobody. Because if you do that, obviously, it's going to reflect in the sternness of the sentence. Also, in mitigation, they stress that her marriage had recently broken down at the time of the offences. Well, I would imagine that's because her partner thought that there was something massively wrong with her. I would imagine that all we're seeing there is a partner with some very good sense. Well done you, whoever you are. I would have strongly encouraged you to have openly talked about why you left, because clearly you have an instinct and an insight that most of us would wish to mirror. I don't actually know why they broke up, but just throwing it out there, that's what I imagine would be the reasoning behind it. But again, of course, when you're married and you break down, it's going to cause a level of stress. Stress does not make you a child molester. It just isn't in the same space as that. What are we talking about when this is mitigation? Genuinely, please. Answers on a postcard. How is this mitigation? Oh, my marriage has broken down. Therefore, I thought I'd just incite other men to abuse an innocent little girl. Also, and this is the pièce de résistance. Having worked in mental health for 20 years, this is one of those statements where I just think, can somebody just remove the defence barrister and sit them down for a short period of time to just discuss how diabolical this mitigation point is? Because apparently she was diagnosed with bipolar. Yeah. Bipolar. I don't know whether it's type 1 or type 2. I imagine they'll have gone for type 1 because that would show more extremes, shall we say. But the idea that they're even throwing it in as that, well, I mean, bipolar and child molestation? Clearly, we're going to throw it in because the judge is going to think, well, it could be a reason. No judge thinks that. Bipolar is a mental health classification. It's different for different people, but let's just take the stereotypical perspective of it. The highs, the lows. It can be crushingly depressed. You can be absolutely unable to even get out of bed because it is so diabolically treacherous, the world in those moments. Or you can be really manic. For example, one of my really good friends has bipolar. It's very cyclical, so it can be very quick. You know, she was very, very wealthy. She was an incredible woman working out in Japan. She will not mind me saying this at all. She tells the story herself very openly. And her mania would cause her to shop. And she would wake up and she'd like spent 40 grand on shoes. So yes, we see extremes in the way that somebody feels. And that was a very extreme case I've just described there. But no way does that affect your sexual predilections towards children. And I don't even think that should have been brought in. Because genuinely, again, it is so insulting to people who struggle with mental illness and bipolar in particular. Now, the judge, who I genuinely picture in my mind, was just doing that all the time, just nodding their head. Yeah, mitigation, yeah. Can we just get to the sentencing? Because honestly, this person will have known this is all absolute fluff. There's no reality, there's no link, there's no mitigation in those comments. So the judge acknowledged the diagnosis, accepts that her mental state at the time may not have been perfect, but immediately comes to the conclusion of it literally makes no difference to the offences. Nothing that you've told me in any way makes you less culpable. You were the ringleader of the abuse. The ringleader. And for somebody who says that they're so unstable and so depressed and also dealing with the trauma of a breakup, you don't seem too sad, sweetheart. You seem to be really motivated by power. You seem to be very capable of manipulation. And you seem to be getting your kicks in a whole host of sexual ways that doesn't denote that you're struggling, apart from the fact that you must, to some degree, struggle with just existing when you think about the personality characteristics and basis of the person that you are. So when she's sentenced, she's given a life sentence with a minimum term of 10 years. I think that is minimal. I appreciate that the judge actually did give her a relatively stern sentence compared to a lot of abusers. But again, what she did to that little girl's got a life sentence. It's as simple as that. That child is going to have to live with the impact of these crimes forever, whereas she may be freed at some point. Now, the judge did state that the scale of depravity beggared belief. And I don't think you can swear in court. And as you know, you can't throw things at people in court. I guess that those words are probably as strong as they can be. I do not understand why we are not putting these kind of individuals in prison for a lot longer, because I genuinely don't think that it is representative of the damage that they've caused. And I don't think it sends out a strong message to perpetrators of child abuse. I kind of make myself at some points worry that these kind of sentences mean that these kind of predators aren't thinking about the impact of their behaviour, because bear in mind, a lot of them are totally narcissistic. They just care about themselves. And therefore, if they don't really see ultimately there's a consequence that is that scary, then why are they going to adjust their behaviour? And like I said, you do get certain sentences that are really high. I'm going to cover the Ian Watkis lost profits case. He got a really high sentence. In other countries, you do absolutely get very long sentences. You've got Peter Scully. I've covered that case.
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Already, he is an individual who absolutely will not see the light of day again. But of course, he was also involved in the murder of a child. But it worries me. In the UK, I just don't think our sentences are effective, not when it comes down to child abuse. And I don't think you can change child abusing predators. I genuinely don't. I appreciate that some individuals do not involve themselves in contact crimes and do not look online. As I noted them, they're called virtuous paedophiles. But I think many, and definitely those who actually have contact crimes with children, cannot be rehabilitated. Sorry. And in fact, some of the group work programs that have been placed in prisons in the UK have actually been known to incite behaviour when people leave as opposed to reduce it. We're not doing a good job. Now, Bevan's family are a family that I respect. First of all, they insist that she actually had a really loving upbringing. So they cannot pinpoint how she became this reprehensible monster. And that must be incredibly challenging for her family, because particularly if you've loved somebody and you've cared for them and you see them regularly and they've been part of your fabric and foundation, to find out that actually they've been harbouring this malevolence and darkness within them, that must be very challenging, particularly if you've had them around your own children. And bear in mind, at her age, I imagine that she would have been around other family members' kids. So it's very disconcerting for the family, obviously deeply concerning, and I think that they will have more questions than answers regarding who she has been in their world. And since her crimes were actually exposed, they were like, go away. We don't want anything to do with you. We literally see you as a monster. I may be adding some artistic license there, but genuinely, that's what I think they have been like, because they've disowned her and they want nothing to do with her. And I am like, amen to that. Honestly, not so long ago, I listened to a news program. It's not MSM, but it's a news program on a particular channel. I won't name the channel. I don't want to do that. But they were talking about a celebrity in the press who's basically given a statement that has helped to bring to justice a child molester in the UK. And they're related to this person. And one of the people who were leading a program were talking about this case and were basically saying, what kind of a person betrays their family member by rejecting and abandoning them during a time of need. I tell you what kind of person, me, because let me tell you, if my brother or my sister or anybody in my family went near a child in that way, hurt a child in that way, then they better hope that they're locked up. They better hope. That would be their best outcome. Because believe me, I have, like she said, she had no boundaries in a completely dark, depraved area. I have no boundaries when it comes down to the protection and safeguarding of children. They are what matter most in our world. And how dare somebody exploit them? How dare somebody harm them in the way that we're discussing today? And for a newscaster to dare to suggest that you should still support a family member who is this broken, this dark, and has gone ahead and harmed so many people, either indirectly through spreading these pieces of information on the web or directly through contact crimes, is beyond me. Genuinely, I think you have an absolute right as a family member to never speak to that person again. And of course, if you had a family member who was struggling with paedophile feelings and came and said, look, there is something wrong with me, and they've never had a contact crime, that's a whole different ballgame. That's about actually being there to help direct them in the right place and space. And it's really difficult. I've worked with people who have literally had people in their family confide in them, and it traumatizes that person, but also it does give us an opportunity to direct them to the right places. And even on 2 occasions, they've gone to the police, these family members, to ask for support and help. And the consequences are that hopefully, because of that, they will have received at least some kind of intervention. Now, because of that, we're in a situation where Bevan has been sentenced, hasn't got the support of her family, and hopefully is going to be off the streets, because one of the things that the judge has said is, okay, she's going to serve a minimum sentence of 10 years. If she gets released, it's not going to end there. So the actual reality is the judge has imposed a lifelong restraining order on Bevan to stay away from her entire family. That's number 1. So basically, imagine that. They don't want anything to do with her. And it is so powerful when a judge does that. It's very rare that you get a lifelong restraining order. Very rare. Because obviously we come from a system of change and hope and belief that people can make up for the error of their ways. But the family want nothing to do with it, and the judge has validated that. That lifelong restraining order is there. Also, she'll be on licence. Bear that in mind. So she will not be allowed near children. She will not be able to have access to kids. And if she does get out and have any access to kids, the consequences will be enormous for her, as they should be. Like I said, just throwing it out there, I think her sentence is still very piffly. Now, 42-year-old Hutton, he had actually already pleaded guilty to 1 sexual assault of a child and 3 counts of making indecent images of children. Oh, where do we start? So, through his counsel, he tells the court that he took ownership for his outrageous, disgusting and disgraceful behaviour. Yeah, sure you do, sweetheart. I mean, we all know it's BS. We all know the only thing that they're upset about is being caught. And he got 4 years. 4 years, I kid you not, 4 years. 4 years. It is blindsiding to me. How does 4 years represent what we've talked about so far today? Then we have 62-year-old Rafferty. He pleads guilty to 1 count of rape, 1 sexual assault by penetration, 1 sexual assault of a child, and 6 counts of making indecent images of children. Now, through his counsel, he tells the court that he knows he deserves to be punished, and he was actually relieved for being punished. You know what's ironic? I actually think out of all of the statements, that's the one that doesn't lend me a sense of empathy towards him at all. Lock him up, throw away the key, let the locals have 25 minutes with him. What I feel, however, is he at least has a level of conscience about the reality of his actions. Because to say, I deserve punishing, and actually I'm relieved because there is something so broken in me I can't control myself, at least that actually gives us a sense of, yes, this man understands. that there is something deeply dangerous and dark about him, and he wants to be protected from himself. So with him, again, a more reasonable sentence, but I just still don't think it resonates with you guys or me that this is enough. It's also worth noting that they will have a sexual harm prevention order that's imposed on all three of the defendants, and that genuinely means that if they have any unsupervised contact of any kind with any child, they will be in serious trouble. Now, aside from the sexual harm prevention order, all three of the defendants also are not allowed to use a computer or access the internet without informing the police. And it's very serious, the consequences of that if you do. For example, take Gary Glitter. Paul Gadd is also known as, he was a performer in the 60s, 70s, 80s. He was also a really good friend of Jimmy Savile, the prolific paedophile. I've covered it on my channel if you haven't watched it already. But again, it means that they will get into serious trouble if they're out on the streets and they are trying to access anything online. But obviously, the whole premise of this is to protect the children from these kind of predators trying to look again at this kind of horrific sexual exploitation of children. Now, it doesn't finish there, because on August 2022, this is following this undercover police operation, because like I said, it's like a spider's web, they actually identify another man who's connected to Bevan. This is 31-year-old Christopher Smith of Clare Drive, Tiverton, Devon. Now, Bevan had sent in videos of herself abusing children. And in reply to a video of her literally abusing a little girl, he'd told Bevan that he would have liked to have been there. And also, in response to a video of her abusing a little boy, he'd replied, "That's hot." I don't know, sweetheart, not as hot as you're going to be when you take your last breath and the devil comes and collects you to burn you for eternity in hell. But we can see he's sexually motivated and incentivized by this kind of grotesque material. So then officers had posed as chat room users on Kik Messenger, and they'd connected with Smith, and he had just instantly got involved. And of course, it didn't take him long to show them his true level of depravity. So he offers to trade images of a child abuse, and he actually sent 3 images of his own. He also claimed to have some personal stuff. Unfortunately, because the police are so invested in bringing these predators to justice and also protecting kids, that's their main intention, he is literally traced by his mobile phone. And then, of course, when they forensically explore his phone, it unearths 2 other videos from Bevan, along with another 36 images and videos of child abuse. Now, he subsequently gets convicted of 2 counts of distributing indecent images of children and 4 counts of downloading them. And he got 2 years, 4 months at Exeter Crown Court. I, again, stand by my feelings. I do not think that that is a long sentence, and I do not think it's representative of the absolute horror that these kind of individuals create in children's lives. So senior Crown prosecutor for the CPS, that's Pauline Newrick, when she was asked to comment about Bevan, she stated that Bevan's paedophile network was one of the worst cases she'd been involved in. And you can imagine how often these individuals were involved in cases where paedophile networks are part of it. And to actually uphold her as the worst, it's demonstrative of the kind of materials that they must have seen. Fortunately, we're not privy to any of that, nor would any of us ever wish to be. But you can just envisage that if she's saying that with her vast experience and involvement in cases like this, it demonstrates the horror that that woman was creating in a child's life and children's lives, in fact. Now, Bevan hadn't just sexually abused a child herself, which is enough to, I don't know, have her towed to an island infested with sharks, very dangerous bears, and only, I don't know, things that give you diarrhea to eat, that kind of thing. But she hadn't just done that. she'd been really active in encouraging others to participate in the abuse. And again, I stand by what I say. I do not believe in any way, shape or form you can encourage somebody to harm a child unless you want to harm a child. It's got to be within you, because a well-adjusted human is so averse, disgusted and horrified by that kind of material that they go straight to the police, full stop. And if you know that a child is being abused that you literally are aware of, you're going to turn that in because you want to safeguard that child. So these individuals who got involved, they wanted to get involved and they deserve every painful day incarcerated, as far as I'm concerned, and will do ad infinitum. Amen. So Pauline Nurick stated this: an innocent child is at the heart of this case, a child who was dragged into the depraved and sordid world of these three people who could have tried to protect her. That child is now receiving the care and support she has a right to expect. We hope this successful conclusion of this case helps her in this long journey ahead. And let's be honest, there is no way the incarceration of these absolute predators is going to lessen the blow of what she has endured. But at least the message to her is clear. You are believed, you are validated, because we understand the pain that you have endured, and we feel responsible to prove this to you by making sure that these individuals are placed where they need to be placed. In hell.
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.
When your company earns unlimited 2% cash back on all purchases with Capital One, that's serious business. So Stephen at SandCloud got a serious business card, the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One.
We used our 2% cash back to help build our retail presence.
Savvy, Stephen.
And we get big purchasing power, so our business can spend more and earn more.
The Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus.
All right, in prison. In hell one day, but for now in prison. In hell, sooner, ideally, rather than later, but for now in prison. Now, when it comes down to the UK Sex Offenders Register, there are approximately 100,000 people on it, which is just harrowing, but let's be honest, that is no way representative of the reality of the numbers. In fact, they suspect that there are 10 times the number of paedophiles in our society. Yeah. So at least 1 million individuals would be considered to be paedophiles. And like I said, some of them will be sex offenders engaging in contact crimes. Some of them will be paedophile child molesters who use the internet to violate children by witnessing content. They're all the same, as far as I'm concerned. And often there is this massive bias and stereotype, which I think is really harmful, and that is that it's only men who are paedophiles, but it's not true. Studies have actually suggested that around 5%, possibly even more, are women. And when they look at the evidence of the crimes themselves, it indicates that the crimes they commit are equally as horrific as those committed by males. And if you think about some high-level cases, Vanessa George is a great one. I've covered that one. She sexually assaulted up to 64 children. They were as young as 2. And this is while she worked at a nursery in Plymouth. Let that sink in. Because what do these predators do? They find a place and a space to find available and vulnerable individuals that they feel a sense of domination, power and sexual attraction to. So a nursery for Vanessa George was absolutely perfect. And like Bevan, she filmed the abuse, she sent it to other paedophiles, and she only got 7 years in 2009. That's a minimum sentence, but 7 years. I mean, why bother? I say that as if 7 years isn't a lot. What I'm getting across to you is 7 years is not indicative of the seriousness of this crime and what she did. How dare she get to be free again? How dare she get to be free? And she is. So when we look at cases like this, and we look at the depravity, it demonstrates that just because the statistics aren't as high, we should not underestimate the actual harm that these individuals inflict. Now, one thing that is quite surprising is that cases that involve female sex offenders are often tried in family courts, which means that the reporting is restricted. So we don't even hear about it. It remains this largely hidden problem. And why should they not be put in the press like the males? I don't understand it. Surely we should know who are walking our streets and the dangers that they create for our children. Also, I think that there's a real lack of understanding around female perpetrator abuse. And I think because of that, a lot of cases go unreported. So the true level statistically could be way higher. Now, this is truly shocking because according to police figures, over the 4-year period between 2015 and 2019, there were at least 2,297 reported cases of children being abused by women. Ladies and gentlemen, that is an 84% increase on the previous 4 years. What is going on? First of all, on a positive note, it's that hopefully children are understanding that we believe them when they come forward and tell us about this heinous abuse, and that they understand they should not be touched in the way or coerced in the way or assaulted in the way that they are finding themselves assaulted. But there is another side of me that thinks, is this just as well because we have a society with access to the dark web? A society where there are these organisations that allow inappropriate material to some degree to be distributed on it? Is it that women who don't want to be caught for this predilection that they hold are now finding avenues that make them feel safer in exploring that deviant side of themselves? I don't know. But what I do know is an 84% increase is enormous. And that means that the statistics that we have of 5% is probably way underestimating the reality of these kind of predators. I think as a society, we find female sex offenders really difficult to accept. But boy, with those kind of statistics, we need to confront it. We need to face it. Because if we don't, we cannot protect current victims. We cannot make them safe. This case is one of those that startled me from day one and that I've followed and that hopefully you feel I've covered thoroughly. I spent many years safeguarding children. It's a privilege and something that I'm very proud of. And I'm incredibly privileged by the journeys I've shared with children and adults who have experienced this kind of abuse. We have to remember as a society that these kind of individuals, they live in our neighbourhoods, all of our neighbourhoods. They are not rare. They are individuals who do not care at all about the safeguarding of children. In fact, they seek to exploit and destroy them. I think the more that we talk about this, the more that we face and confront the horrible truth, the more we express the reaction, revulsion, the way that we see them as depraved and disgusting, the more consequences will be given. And when you think about the sentences I've covered today, I think consequences are not being given at the level that they should. I know that many of you who watch my channel have experienced and endured sexual abuse as children. I know that some of you have been victims whose lives have been literally capsized by these bastards. Just be aware that for the most part in our society, what we feel towards those predators is absolute revulsion, and we desire to some degree retribution. And even though it does not heal the scars that you carry, I hope that it reflects the feelings that we have towards the individuals who inflicted the pain on you, and also that you understand that people want to fight to make sure that sentences are given that are appropriate. Even when they fall short, at least we have the anger to create content like this, to try to discuss the issue publicly and to force those in law enforcement and the courts to do more to actually represent the horror that these depraved individuals create for these children and for those living their lives with a history of sexual abuse. That's it for Bang to Rights today. Join me for the next episode. See you then. Be safe.
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.